Dictionaryreference.com gives us the following definition of listening: to give attention with the ear, to attend closely for the purpose of hearing or give ear, to pay attention, to heed, or to obey, to wait attentively for a sound. Based on this definition of listening, I want to ask you a few questions about your listening style. Do you think your listening strategy is effective? What are some obstacles that you face in listening actively? And finally, what are some areas that you'd like to improve in your listening style? I'm going to offer you 5 applicable suggestions for improving your listening. And I want you to know I'm going to be right alongside with you in making these improvements in my own listening. The first key element of becoming a more effective listener is listening actively. If you've ever read a Dr. Seuss book to a child, you know exactly what this looks like. They are 100% involved in the story that they're hearing. They're on the edge of their seats, they peer over the page and look at the pictures, and when it's funny, they giggle and roll on the floor. Now, I don't recommend that you necessarily roll on the floor in laughter when listening to a speech, even if it's funny. But I would encourage you to listen that closely, giving your full attention to the speaker. There are some distractions that can present themselves to interrupt this complete attention. Minimize these if you can, especially the ones that come from yourself. Keep distracting thoughts at bay and focus entirely on what the speaker is saying. Think about what you're hearing. Don't just let the sounds hit you, but really internalize them, understanding what the speaker means. Finally, assume value in what the speaker is saying, regardless of whether their topic is of particular interest to you. It is of particular interest to them and therefore has value. Treat them with the value that their speech requires. Going hand in hand with listening actively is listening for total meaning, which is the second step in effective listening. Consider nonverbal cues as well as verbal cues. Sometimes what is not said is just as important as what is said. These nonverbal cues can involve body language and omissions by the speaker from the speech. Recognize the general message of the speech. This was described in the text as seeing the forest as well as the trees. So when you're listening to a speaker and receiving their points one by one, try and see the big picture. Try and put it all together so you have a comprehension of the general meaning of the speech. Try to hear hard to hear messages in the speech. Sometimes what the speaker says doesn't agree with our personal opinions, but try to listen anyway. It is also important to listen with empathy. This means putting yourself in the speaker's shoes. Now, I've seen some speaker's shoes that look pretty darn uncomfortable, so it's probably a good thing that that's not what that saying means. While you're listening to the speaker, try to understand their feeling behind what they're saying. Understand completely where they're coming from by recognizing not just what they're saying, but the emotion and passion behind it. Communicate your understanding back to the speaker. This can take a couple of forms in the response of your feedback to them, both during the speech and after the speech. During the speech, you can show your empathy by nodding with your facial expressions or by smiling at them. Sometimes what the speaker is saying is challenging to our beliefs and opinions. That's why our fourth point, listening with an open mind, emphasizes this listening challenge. When you're listening to a speaker, especially if they have a different viewpoint from you, try to listen with a completely open mind. Leave your prejudice at the door, and if you have biases, don't use them to filter what the speaker is saying while you're listening to the speech. You can analyze the speech later and decide whether you agree with it or not based on those opinions of yours, but don't bring it to the speech with you. Also, don't assign meanings to the speaker's points. Let them do that. Your job is to understand what they're saying, and this requires listening with an open mind. Finally, you have the responsibility to listen ethically. This means giving every speaker a fair chance, not one over the other because of personal relationship with any one speaker rather than another, but treat each one equally on a fair playing field and give each speaker a chance regardless of your personal views of them. This also means giving honest feedback during the speech and after the speech. Especially any verbal feedback after the speech, make sure that you are truthful in what you say, not just what you consider your personal truth, but really give them an honest evaluation, regardless of whether it lines up with what you personally feel or not. These 5 guidelines have the ability to enhance your listening when applied to your life, making you an effective, professional, and intentional listener. In this, you will fulfill the definition of listening. Thank you.